Hi everybody, welcome again. Today we are in the famous parcel, and to be honest, my favorite parcel. We are in Nuits-Saint-Georges Premier Cru les Saint-Georges. So this parcel is very important for me. I just want to show you this parcel in first and why Les Saint-Georges is so special. So Les Saint-Georges, we are really in the middle of Nuits-Saint-Georges Coteau. So just behind me, you have Nuits-Saint-Georges Village here. Okay, this is Les Longes-Cours. Here you have the Premier Cru, and in the upper side of Nuits-Saint-Georges Premier Cru les Saint-Georges, you have Les Vaucrins, which is also a very nice Premier Cru. Vaucrins mean vaurien, though no value because it was a very poor soil. Les Saint-Georges here, it's a very specific terroir because, like all the Grand Cru in the Côte de Nuit, we are in the middle of the slope, which is where you find all the Grand Cru in Burgundy. This wine wasn't classified as a Grand Cru, but because in 1936, where the classification has been made for all the vineyards in Burgundy, we have decided for political and economical reasons to don't classify Les Saint-Georges. I would like to come back a little bit in the history of the classification in Burgundy. The first classification happened in 1855, so it was the classification of Mr. Jules Laval. And this classification, there are 5 levels of classification. The first level, it was the highest classification. It was the top cuvée, the highest cuvée, after second, third, fourth classification. And this classification at this time, the Saint-Georges was classified like one of the best terroirs in all the Côte de Nuit and Côte de Beaune area, at the same level than Richebourg, Chambertin, Montrachet. It was quite the same level. And when the new classification has been made just after the 29 crisis, the négociant was the only buyer of Burgundy wine in Burgundy. And in Nuits-Saint-Georges, the powerful of the négociant was quite big. And also a big competition between the négociant from Beaune and négociant from Nuits-Saint-Georges. The model of the négociant in the 30s, because it was quite difficult to sell the wine after 29 crisis, it was a sort of champagne model. I explained it was to make a sort of wine of cuvée. So they make a wine of Nuits-Saint-Georges, of Nuit, of Gevrey or Beaune, but it was a style of wine. It was not especially a wine from a specific place. Where when the wine grower and the owner of Nuits-Saint-Georges say, we would like to have a classification of Les Saint-Georges, Les Vaucrins, and Les Cailles, which is a neighbor vineyard, the négociant say, do what you want, but don't forget who purchased the wine. We don't have to forget, also at this time, it was quite tough to sell any bottle of wine. And the second reason, it's an economical reason. The reason that's at this time, they have to pay a land tax. And land tax was quite high. And especially when you have a Grand Cru, you have to pay 2 or 3 times the price versus for Premier Cru or Village. It's why the owner of the Saint-Georges and some other very nice Premier Cru have decided, they say, okay, maybe we'll not sell the wine, we have to pay more tax for what? To don't sell our wine. It's why they have decided to don't have any Grand Cru in Nuits-Saint-Georges. Now we have tried to change a little bit the history, and I like to say to repair anomaly in 2007 to promote this terroir. It's 7 hectares, 0.5 for 13 owners, and to promote this wine as a Grand Cru. So the journey is very long, and nearly 13 years now. It's we are, I think, more than 10 years more in front of us to maybe have a good answer, but I'm very confident about the future to classify this terroir like Les Saint-Georges as a Grand Cru. I would like to come back to this terroir. Why this terroir is so special? So it's a terroir, the clay is quite brown. You see, this clay, you have a very small piece of clay, like a pearl of clay, and inside you find this kind of limestone. This limestone, it's very interesting limestone because this limestone came from the depth of the soil. In the middle of Les Saint-Georges, if you see les Saint-Georges in diagonal like this, you can see a movement of soil. And in the middle, 2 meters down, you have a fault. The scratching of the fault like this, and the water go through the fault, create this kind of limestone, which is a sort of crystal of limestone. We like to call this stone like a calcite. And this calcite came naturally at the surface and changed a little bit my wine between the moment where I took over the vineyard in 2001 and 2012, 2013, when the wine began to have a little bit more purity and more verticality, so more freshness, more tightness. It's not, Saint-Georges is not a wine that people think like classic Nuits-Saint-Georges with a big shoulder, a big tannins. It's more wine with more finesse, more sophistication, and it's never a wine with, it's a wine for aging of course, but it's not very muscular wine. It's more wine with finesse and very delicate wine, but without too much softness also. It's a wine with tannins. So this terroir, the clay is quite brown, and also it's like this because before it was more compact. We apply organic and biodynamic farming for nearly 20 years now, biodynamic since 2005, 15 years ago, and we have really much more supple. When we walk on the soil, we can see that the soil, it's really like a sponge. It's very important for the activity of the soil. So 19, it's a vintage I love in Les Saint-Georges, because 19 is a vintage where you have a real identity, and Les Saint-Georges show quite a good purity, and also you can feel the bones of the wine. And Les Saint-Georges, for now, when we taste 19, is still in the barrel, but you can feel the body of the wine, the tannins. The tannin is quite firm, but without any dryness. And everything is very well integrated with a very good harmony in the wine. And it's something very interesting in 19, when you taste the wine and at the end of the mouth, you really feel that the wine never stops giving some aromas. And when the glass is empty, after what we like to call the dry glass, you smell and it's so floral. So 19 is a mix of body and with firm tannins, but without any dryness, and with a very interesting freshness and purity, and especially at the end of the mouth. So thank you to follow us, and see you in the next vineyard. Bye bye.